Good afternoon and welcome to the Wednesday, August 26th business meeting of the Douglas County Board of County Commissioners. We want to welcome all of our folks who are joining us on Zoom. We just want to pass a bit of information on regarding how we run our meetings on Zoom during this time of social distancing. If visual aids are used during the meeting, the presenter will share the screen with the call. Participants will not be able to view them without a computer, smartphone, or tablet. All participants will be entered into the meeting with their audio muted, meaning the commission and the public will not be able to hear you. Presenters will be unmuted when their agenda item comes up. We ask that all online presenters use good conference call etiquette and mute their line when not speaking, and please introduce themselves each time they speak. If you have public comment on the agenda item or under regular public comment, please use the raise your hand function on Zoom. Staff will call on you and unmute you. We ask the speakers give their names and addresses for the minutes, or just your address. You don't have to give us multiple addresses. I want to be clear about that. The county reserves the right to shut off the microphone and remove any speaker from the meeting if they are vulgar, rude, or inappropriate. The chat function has been disabled and a recording of this meeting will be available on our website after each meeting. We have 4 items on our consent agenda, 3 regular agenda items, appointments, general public comment, and then commissioner or administrator miscellaneous. We'll start with the consent agenda items. Would any member of the commission like to remove a consent agenda item for further discussion?
I would not.
None. We'll check if the public has a consent agenda item they'd like to remove for further discussion or comment. And we're checking online and we're seeing none. So I'd take a motion for items 1, 2, 3, and 4 on our consent agenda.
Move to approve. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 3-0. And this moves us to our first regular agenda item, which is an update on the addition of murals to the county underpass at 31st Street. And I see Rick Wright is here. Hi, Rick.
Commissioners, I'd turn this item over to Daviana Humble, our management analyst, to introduce the item.
Good evening, commissioners. So this agenda item before you today is the further discussion and consider approval for the addition of a mural under the county underpass on 31st Street. To bring you guys back, I think maybe about this time last year is when we began discussions. It was brought to the commissioner's attention and staff attention that there was racist graffiti happening on the underpasses near Baker wetlands. And specifically our concern was the county-owned underpass. And so I believe around this time last year, county staff put together kind of some documents regarding pricing of a potential mural, an RFQ process to get artists requests for their qualifications about their ability to do a mural. And that information was presented to the commission back in December of 2019. Commissioners directed county staff to pursue probably some cooperation and collaboration with community partner Van Gogh. So county staff met with Van Gogh. I believe time is relative now, but just a few months ago, it seems like, to discuss what kind of undertaking this would be for Van Gogh and what a project would look like. And so in your agenda packet, there is the mural proposal that Van Gogh put together. And Rick Wright is here with us to kind of go over that proposal and provide any additional information for commissioners. And so at this point, I'll turn it over to him.
All right, I'm Rick Wright with Van Gogh. I'm the art director here. I put together this proposal. First of all, can everybody hear me okay? Okay, awesome. Put together this proposal. I think we talked originally maybe just before the pandemic hit, and then things went awry for a while, but we're kind of back on task and think this is still a very doable project. So I think in June I submitted this to Ms. Plensky and Ms. Hummel. So essentially the underpass there at 31st Street. The wall that is immediately adjacent to the bike walk path beneath the street, I think that's probably the one that gets hit with graffiti the most, and probably the one looking to be muralized, if you will, is about 12 foot tall, about 52 feet long. And we put a proposal together going from the top to the bottom of that location. We do know that during the springtime it tends to flood pretty heavily through there, so that's a concern and something that we're going to kind of tackle how to work around that. I think primarily that was going to dictate the time of year that a mural really could be effectively done in that location. Typically, Van Gogh has worked on mural projects in the spring, in our spring session, but as I've been told by folks from the county, that's when there's more water down there, so it wouldn't be very likely. So I think the best time of year really is right about now, if there's a window of opportunity to create something. So our programming is just getting ready to gear up for this fall session. So we're kind of eagerly anticipating a direction here if the county decides to put a mural in that location. I do want to say that we're on board with the notion that I think artwork in the community does a lot to mitigate graffiti and vandalism. We've had a number of murals of our own throughout the city of Lawrence and the county to kind of prove that, whether it's a glass mural that's on the side of our building or a mural underneath 6th Street across from Pinckney Elementary. And those are a couple locations where we've had some really visible murals, as well as there's one on 23rd Street in front of Natural Grocers. So I do have a short little 2.5-minute clip to share of one of our murals in progress. If you care to see it at this time, or I can take some questions or comments from anybody that might have something to ask or share.
Why don't you show the clip, Rick, and
Okay.
they might have questions.
Okay, I'll go ahead and.
So I think we have to give Rick the ability to share his screen, and we're going to try this. This is going to be a technological Zoom. See if we can make this work.
Okay, I've got my screen sharing up, so you tell me if you can see it.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, I'll go ahead and play here. This is a mural from May of 2018. Very similar in size and scale of what's planned at the Underpass. Okay. So that was a time-lapse video clip of a mural we did 2 years ago at Natural Grocers on 23rd and Naismith. The size and complexity of that mural was probably very similar to what the Underpass location would be. Roughly 60 feet long, and that one required use of a little bit of scaffolding too. I do want to say that I think one of the challenges that we've had as an organization during this pandemic is figuring a way that we can serve a number of youth in the county more effectively. And I think our incorporating physical distancing in our space and all the precautions that we have to abide by from CDC and county guidelines, we can only serve a certain number within the confines of our building. And a mural project such as this is large enough that it gives us the potential option of involving more youth than we might had we been doing our programming on site in our building, which is a really attractive thing for us right now, because we love to find ways that we can engage more youth, and social distancing outdoors on a large mural like this is a lot easier than the confines of our interior spaces right now. So I'm happy to share any other information or questions people have. I think most of it is kind of outlined in that proposal that was attached to your agendas. So let me know if you have any questions.
Rick, this is Nancy Fellman. I have just logistical question for you. Once the mural is finished, what is the long-term kind of upkeep of it? Like if there's some tagging on it or somehow it's just needs to be touched up or something needs to be covered up, is that something that you all would come back and do, or then does that become the county's? I don't know that our public works guys are ready to,
Sure.
make something pretty like that, but.
That's a good question. Generally, we try to make sure whoever commissions a mural knows that there's the chance something could happen over time. We're a flexible enough organization and small enough that it's not a big deal for us to come up and touch up a little spot or something. If it's significant, then we can have a discussion of a bigger picture. But so little things, not a big deal. If there's something significant, I think that's a conversation between the county and Van Gogh as well. I will say that because that location expects to get a lot of water, moisture throughout the spring season, we're going to do our best to find a top coat solution that will be as close to bulletproof as we can get, whether it's a sort of an epoxy sealant or an anti-graffiti covering. There are other muralists that have done that and where they've had graffiti on their work, and putting a more solid barrier on that allows it to be power washed or cleaned a lot easier without damaging the artwork beneath. So that is some of the logistics we need to explore in terms of what product could be put on top of that, because I think that our normal sealants that we would use on a vertical surface wouldn't necessarily hold up to the weather conditions at that location. So we'll communicate what the best protection for that is, and I think that would probably mitigate a lot or allow for easier cleaning by the county without having to do the artwork per se. But again, we're also flexible that we're certainly open to communication about fixing a little area that's just not holding up. We take pride in the work, and we want to make sure that it's going to last for a long time. So it's as much a calling card for us as I think it will be for the county.
Rick, this is Patrick Kelly, and this may be for Daviana. I know it's been some time since we talked about this mural project, and I just heard some comments in the community, and we need just thought we might remind the community that there is actually research on the use of murals to deter graffiti. Daviana, I don't know if you have that handy, or Rick, if you know, but it might be good for the community to hear that.
Yeah, I can speak about it a little bit. This is Daviana. Based on research that I've done, and I assume the experience and research that Rick has done throughout this entire process in his career, that it's more of a kind of anecdotal normative prevention mechanism for graffiti. So essentially, artists, people who do graffiti, typically respect the work that's been done on a building or on a mural enough not to tag it again or make it, or tagging be less susceptible in that general area. And there are some statistics that I can also share out once again from the original information from last year, to hand that out to the public once again, or put it on, or attach it to your agenda packet later. But there is some research done that says that murals really help in deterring it. I can't guarantee 100% that people aren't going to go out there and tag it again, simply because in the area it's located, it could be very easy to do some tagging, do some racist graffiti, and nobody notice it until somebody calls and says, hey, something has happened. But I think once again, it goes to that respect thing and respect of the artistry, that it's less likely to happen. And Rick, if you want to speak on that, if you have any other information to provide.
I mean, I think anecdotally, we kind of see the same thing. And I mentioned it briefly before, but we have 2 substantial murals in kind of vulnerable locations. Van Gogh is located 7th in New Jersey. I mean, I think there are a number of people that pass by our building that, you know, could be inclined to throw up some graffiti or whatever, but we've got a glass mural on the side of our building with nearly 1,500 pieces to it that could be easily broken by anything from a rock or whatever, and that's left untouched for the last 5 years. Additionally, Pinckney Tunnel that goes underneath 6th Street, it's a location where we've had a mural for 7 years, and to my understanding, there's only been 1 incident of any significance that we were able to kind of easily repair and help out that community with, and it was really not a big deal. I think generally people respect the work of other artists. I think Van Gogh has a name within our community of helping underserved youth, and you know, our same population who might in other circumstances have the opportunity to be out there tagging something, are invested in that work, and I think that kind of bleeds out into the community as well. So I think generally there's a respect for the artwork in a place. There's no promise of anything, but I generally agree with what Daviana has said, and I know that I've seen some of her research on that too, and I'd agree with that.
I have a couple of technical questions, and so I apologize. This comes from a little bit of my work on the Cultural Arts Committee and talking about murals. I'm sure Sarah's taking a big breath right now and shaking her head. But one is, Rick, are you planning on cataloging the colors that you use on the murals, so that, you know, that sometimes when murals can fade over time, and then when people, we've had city artwork, I know that when people came back and said, hey, we need to, you know, freshen this up a little bit, you know, maybe the years of water goes by, and then coming up with the actual right color has been challenging, because then they'll paint it and the artist comes back and goes, that's not the color that we had in mind, you know, because it's often city maintenance crews who are sort of filling in the dots or coloring by numbers. Are you planning on cataloging those colors at all in the mural?
Yeah, as perhaps my system doesn't sound as professional as cataloging, but what I do is I generate a palette for each mural, which gives me the recipe that we use for our particular kind of paints, whether it's 2 parts of this and 1 part of that. But I'll generally have some color chips on a board of some sort that has the recipe that we use, and have some physical examples of that. So you know, we could go so far as as matching that to some larger paint industries paint, but it's worked pretty well for us to do any touch-ups or repairs on existing murals that we've had throughout the city at this point. Because the particular paint we've used it for longer than I've been here, over probably the last 15 years. So it's been pretty consistent. So short answer, yeah, I pretty much have a recipe for the color palette that we'll use, and we can replicate that pretty good, whether it's with that recipe or Van Gogh assisting the county and just getting the paint mixed up for touch-ups.
And we just want to honor that artist's work and not deviate too far from it. And so if we just have some record of that, that would really be great.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Like, yeah. The other question is there's some federal case law that has to do with who actually owns the mural, you know, whether it is the artist who created it or the people who create the property. This gets really wacky legally. Is Van Gogh prepared to sign that ownership of the mural over to the county, that we would actually own the rights to that? Because, so for example, if for some reason the county had to adjust that road or tear down the mall, we need to make sure that the artist doesn't have the rights to the actual artwork. That the art, you know, that it actually has been said that the county has the right to do. This came up with the Pollinators mural when that building was being torn down. And I just want to make sure we're thoughtful about that. It might require a little bit of research, and I'm sure maybe you'd like to comment on that before I continue to.
Sure. No, I appreciate you asking about that, and I'll be a little bit evasive with my answer because I'd probably defer to some members of our board to get into some specific legalities of that. But you know, I think there's generally a risk by the artists when they put something out in the public. Public art is subject to the whims of the public or the property owners. So, I mean, I think in general, my understanding would be that, you know, Van Gogh or the artist in general typically reserves the rights to, you know, to say this was our work, our artwork, to use that image in whatever way we choose to for promotional purposes or whatever. But the physical mural itself, I would think, just lies with the person that commissioned it. Much like if you were to visit an artist and buy a painting from them, take it to your home, the artist can still say they did the work. They can make prints of their own painting and sell them, but they don't have the original work any longer, and whoever purchased it can choose to do with that what they may. So I don't think that is too terribly different in my perspective on a mural.
And this is Sarah. I know Rick, when we were kind of talking about this earlier in the spring, we had talked about some sample language in terms of giving Van Gogh the right to reproduce it, but the county has the right to maintain the structure. You know, the artist understands that that might impact the mural if there was substantial maintenance needed on the bridge, and we'll make sure we work that into the agreement with Van Gogh for this project.
Absolutely.
I'm just trying to think of down the road in the future when we're not thinking about it. So thanks for thinking about that. Those are all my questions. Okay, if there's no other questions, we'll open this up for public comment. Is there anybody who would like to provide public comment on this item? Seeing none online, we'll come back up to the commission for comments or motions.
Well, I can say that I checked in with Cheryl Lester, who's the citizen who brought the graffiti to our attention in the very beginning. And I halfway expected that she might either show up at the meeting or Zoom in with us. But I know that she was delighted to know that this project was going to go forward. And I think she is especially pleased that this was going to be in the hands of Van Gogh and with an organization that was going to be very thoughtful in the planning and the visioning of it, and helping kids along the way. So oh, there she is. Hey, Cheryl. Sorry, I don't mean to speak for you.
I appreciate it. I've been here, and actually I had a little hard time just navigating, finding the agenda and the report, and figuring out how I could possibly contribute anything. I didn't know how to do it. I'm sorry to say I haven't been on any of the Zoom meetings yet. So I'm just, very grateful. And I think it's just fantastic that it would have the added benefit of giving these young people an opportunity to do something very meaningful at this very difficult time. And so it sounds to me like a win-win. Really happy about it. Thank you.
Cheryl, thanks for adding your voice. I really appreciate that. And this does seem like a beautiful kind of solution to this. What started out as a kind of an ugly problem, and I think we were frustrated that it was not something that got taken care of last year. But really, it's lovely that it's coming in this moment where the kids need an outdoor project, and it's in a great season. I would assume that the hope is to get going on this soon so that it can be completed this fall, I'm guessing. And so I think it's just wonderful that it's with Van Gogh, and the county has been such a believer in the work of Van Gogh. And so this is a great way to just add to that, add our contribution to the Van Gogh work with the kids. So it's all good.
I would just add this. I'm such a fan of Van Gogh, having been president of the board there, and all that you do. And Rick, I'm just so grateful for the work that you're doing, inspiring our young people, giving them work skills. So this isn't just commissioning a mural, and this is putting kids to work. This is giving them real skills. It is not trite to say that this is giving kids hope. And at a time when we are really struggling as a community, as a nation, to give them a voice and to give them the ability to create art to answer the racial injustice that we see in response to the racial injustice that was under that bridge, just seems perfect to me. And I thank Cheryl for bringing it. I'm just so glad that Van Gogh is doing this work, and really want the public to understand this is more than a mural, that this really is a meaningful, incredibly meaningful project for me, and I hope for the community. And with that, I'd love to make this motion, if that's okay, to approve the mural project with Van Gogh for the county underpass on 31st Street.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Daviana.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
We'll move on to the second item on our agenda, to consider approval to utilize funds from the district attorney's office and the criminal justice coordinator's budget for racial equity training with the Government Alliance on Race and Equity for a total cost not to exceed $42,000. And I see we have Mike Brower here and DA Charles Branson. And I don't know.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Mike.
This is Mike. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm just going to give you a little background, and then I will let District Attorney Branson kind of talk more specifically about the project and the work with GARE. For those who aren't on the line, GARE stands for the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. Back in May, DA Branson asked our Criminal Justice Coordinating Council's Racial and Ethnic Disparities Work Group to work with him to review policies and programs for equity. And we had just begun working with GARE as a county, and we found they had a racial equity toolkit that was really for this purpose. And so as Charles and one of his assistant district attorneys, we started to go through the toolkit. We thought we could work our way through it, but we wanted to reach out to Gare and to see if there was opportunities for a little additional training and support in doing it, because we quickly saw this as an opportunity to expand what the district attorney is envisioning for his department into other county departments and stakeholders in the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. So with that, we began multiple conversations with Gare, and I'm going to let District Attorney Branson talk a little bit about those conversations and where we're at with the handout that we've given you.
Thanks, Mike. This is Charles Branson, District Attorney. So we started looking at the Gare Toolkit and trying to figure out how we could possibly apply it to the policies and procedures we have here in our office. As we dove into the project, we quickly learned that it's not just a toolkit per se, but it's also a process in and of itself of developing things within our own office. I reached out to the subcommittee of CJCC to see about getting their assistance and working through this project. They were eager to jump on board and have joined us in this endeavor. So right now, the policy that we have, or the proposal we have from Gare before the County Commission, is to do some basic training. The training we really felt like would be really appropriate for not just our office, but anybody else in the county and the city that is interested in doing a project like this. And that is specifically the Advancing Racial Equity, the Role of Government virtual workshop. You'll see that through the proposal, there's the virtual workshop, then there's some additional optional items, specifically the Inclusive Outreach and Public Engagement virtual workshop. Again, this is teaching participants in our community how to reach out into our community to create a bigger public engagement on these projects and proposals. And then most of the rest of the proposal itself is really aimed at getting to what we want to do here in the District Attorney's Office with regards to using the toolkit itself, specifically on items here in our office. We've had a chance to talk with people at Gare, the Midwest Regional Representative, Sarah Lawton, and the Director Gare, Gordon, and I can't think of his name, last name at the moment here. That's usually Mike's problem, and I'm channeling Mike right now. To go through and help us build the tools that we need to apply the Racial Equity Toolkit to our office and our policies and procedures, and help build the capacity in doing that. So the proposal kind of before the county right now, I mean, really it's more or less informational to some degree. To the extent that our office is wanting to do this, I have pledged forfeiture funds in our office to take care of the lion's share of this proposal and program, which would probably be about $30,000 worth. I think Mike is looking to pledge the remainder of the amount so we can have those virtual programs that would create more capacity in our community, specifically the Advancing Racial Equity, the Role of Government virtual workshop, and then the Building Capacity workshop that would also be offered out to our partners in the community, whether it be county or city partners.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Charles. Commissioners, any questions?
So this may be more a question for Sarah and Jill. So when we were doing the CARES Act allocations and we opted not to fund the racial equity proposal that was in there, the hope to get kind of the trainer and get some racial equity work going with the city of Lawrence. The idea was that we wanted to bring that back, but make it kind of bigger, bolder proposal beyond the boundaries of the city of Lawrence. Would this be that? Would this be alongside that? I mean, how does this mix with that other proposal? I mean, I think this is something to support for sure. I'm just wondering if this is the beginning of the other one, or if this
Right,
is,
and I'd sent an email that you all were copied on, I think yesterday or the day before, specifically answering that. And I think my interpretation and the way I explained it to Sarah, and I haven't had a chance, even though Leah and I spent virtually most of the day together on the anti-poverty work group for the CHIP. We feel like for our organization and our stakeholders, our local government stakeholders, what this training that Mike and Charles have just talked about will provide kind of the foundational level setting that we need, and not just and potentially not just for folks that are at the department head or chief of police level, but people that are lower in the ranks perhaps as well. And we'd like to tee it up so that we can perhaps create some sustainability in being able to continue to do this sort of training and education to keep doing it after the initial work with GARE. And I say all that as I think we need to do this first before we're prepared to really engage at a community level. We have to understand what our role is and how we can have a meaningful role. And that's my impression of it. Yeah.
And the only thing I'd add to that is I think the proposal that came from the equity advisors through the CARES Act process was looking at more of a community-based, grassroots train the trainer type model, which I think could add on to this, but that also this was something we were already kind of in the works for, thinking about how we would do this internally with our staff. I think that's a more community-based model that I still think needs some work as to, is it just us in the city? Is it the chamber? Is it who's going to sort of shepherd that process? How do we make sure it's inclusive? How do we want to, I think there's some groundwork that needs to be laid in that process. And I know the commission has, expressed a strong desire to how do we kind of close the loop on that. And that's something Jill and I are also going to try to talk to that group and the equity advisor team and talk about how we do that. But we didn't want to slow the project down with GARE that we had already kind of been looking at for internal work because of that work. I mean, frankly, this was in place, was it under development before CARES Act? Does that make sense? I understand it could be very easy to see as conflicting or competing, but I don't believe it is. I think it is probably complementary at the end of the day.
well, and that's what I did read that memo, Jill, and I think it's a good thing to get out in the public conversation that's not necessarily an either or proposal. It's probably a both and, but the timing is important. So an ongoing conversation, but I appreciate the distinction of the two.
And I would add, just because it's going to hopefully come out any day now, our employee equity survey, racial equity survey is going to be released hopefully this week. But I know that for our internal racial equity team, Michelle sent out a draft, tested it out with us. And so I think that's some other complementary foundation work that we as an organization, a system, is doing that will just enhance our ability to be a member of that at that community level.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mike and Charles, I noticed the one workshop that's not available to county and city partners is using the racial equity tool. Can you talk about that decision and just how, was that something that GARE put on it? Is it because it was 12 hours? Just interested.
Yeah, that will be specifically looking at the district attorney's policies and programs. Now, one of the reasons we selected this toolkit is because it requires that we involve community members and other stakeholders. It's not just the DA's employees looking at the policies and programs. So that's what that piece is. So that will include additional community members, but it will be in a more exclusive group as well. And what I'm hoping to ask from those who volunteer, and we've already had some community members that have stepped up and said that they would like to help the DA with this, but we're asking them to also then to be available as experienced people walking through this process to help additional stakeholders as they volunteer as a district attorney has.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions, commissioners? This is a regular agenda item, so we'll open up this item for public comment. Is there anyone online who would like to provide public comment? Seeing none, we'll bring it back up to the commission for comments and/or motions.
I'm happy to. I move to approve this proposal to utilize funds from the District Attorney's Office and Criminal Justice Coordinator's budget for racial equity training services with GARE for a total cost not to exceed $42,000.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to our third item is a legislative update from Little Government Relations, and I see Stuart is here. But I'll check in first with administration, just hand it over to Stuart. All right. Hi, Mallory. Hi, Stuart.
Hello, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, good, good. Thank you. We're happy to be here and talk with you all a little bit about a couple of legislative issues and talk a bit about the work that we've are going to be doing for you all kind of going forward. I want to thank Jill and Sarah for bringing us on board to work with the behavioral leadership group to work on the crisis center, and we've kind of gradually been working more and more with Sarah and Jill to make you all aware of the wider range of issues that are going on in Topeka, some of them related to CARES Act and all kinds of things that have been happening. And we're look forward to working with you all in the future. I'm going to talk for a couple of minutes, and Mallory's going to talk about a couple of issues, and then I'll come back, but please feel free to interrupt if you have any questions. We're going to talk a bit about some of the issues that are out there that are going to come up in this fall in legislative interim committees, and then in January when the legislature returns. We're going to as we prepare for the 2021 session, we're going to we'll be helping you all in the same way that we did with the Crisis Center on a couple of key points, working on the issues that you all will have an interest in, that will have an impact on in Topeka, either on specific policy, on budget issues, or those kinds of things. We'll be helping to work with the staff to define the goals, working with allied groups and partners in the wide range. We're going to talk about everything from taxes to social justice here real quick. So on those topics, working with finding and working with allied groups, making sure that the members of the Douglas County Legislative Delegation are engaged, and then using our work and relationships here in Topeka to make sure that we're reaching out and making contact with the key committee folks that aren't from Douglas County and the folks that need to know how this benefits the state as a whole, the work we're doing. So the work we did on the Crisis Center, we'll try to mirror that on other issues that you all give us guidance and tell us where you want to be. I'm going to just hit a couple of highlights on some issues that are certainly going to be coming up. The first would be, because of the pandemic, because of the economic situation, unemployment, we are going to have very significant legislative action on tax policy. For the last two legislative sessions, bills that have cut taxes, that have attempted to conform Kansas tax policy with federal changes in 2017. Those have been passed 3 times and vetoed 3 times by the governor. And there's the part of the issue about the impact of elections is going to have some impact on how tax policy goes. But I think that, and I'm going to talk briefly about the economic impact on revenue, but that the tax policy is going to be a part of the discussion going forward in terms of what we do. It's also going to include some issues. Sales tax on food is going to be significant. One of the things that we should have resolved before everybody went home and started buying everything on the internet was internet sales tax and use tax, which we didn't get a bill passed in time to take care of that. So that's something that's going to be a high priority. There are going to be a lot of those issues. They have varied impacts around the state. And we just want to make sure to keep you all informed and to make sure if there's issues that we need to deal with specifically. Revenue, when the pandemic arrived, and I think everybody was in cooperation with the Kansas Association of Counties, and everyone was trying to determine what would be the impact on the state, also on local governments. The calculations I think that lots of folks did were, how do we get through 1 quarter of slowed down economy? What's it going to be? What would we lose in sales tax at the state level, at the local level, if we had 1 quarter of a pandemic, and if by the 4th, maybe 2, and by the 4th quarter we were back and everything was normal? Clearly that's not going to be the case. We are going to be dealing with this in a much more drawn out way. There's some information in our report about the revenue estimate that talked about the state being $1.3 billion below projections. That revenue estimate came out in April. We are anticipated at that time, which would have been the 20th of April, 1.3 billion down. And that leaves the state at the end of next state fiscal year with a $700 million budget hole. That was, again, kind of assuming 1 quarter, maybe 2 quarters where things would be bad, and then we'd be back to regular employment, regular revenue, and that clearly is not going to be the case. The governor implemented a few budget cuts right as the fiscal year began, lots of them delaying payments but making some cuts to try to get to zero, because when the budget is state budget's at 0, she has authority to do that. She implemented some of those. A lot of them are going to actually be dealt with whenever a budget is submitted in January to the legislature. But the federal relief that you all that you and your staff have been dealing with, the CARES Act money, has plugged a lot of cost issues related to CARES. But as you all are well aware, you can't, other than a few very specific programs, can't use those resources to fill budget holes. And so that money is going to come in and out pretty quickly, has to be spent or budgeted by encumbered by the end of this year. So that's going to be a significant. The sales tax issues, I've got to tell you, I haven't seen the numbers in Douglas County, but the way we're having conversations here in Topeka about this is, depending on where you are, sales tax has either actually gone up or has gone down, and it tends to be more regional hubs, regionalized folks. Big cities are down because people aren't traveling into those, but if you've got a regional hub, your sales tax have probably gone up. There will be those kinds of revenue losses. Part of what the issue you all are going to have to wrestle with your issues at the local level. At the state level, the absence of revenue and fighting about tax issues means that there's a pretty significant risk on the streams of state funding that come to provide services, from county services to the public schools to higher ed, KDOT, mental health, intellectual and developmental disabilities, juveniles, all those things are at risk, because I don't know what kind of will there will be to raise taxes when we come back next year to address this. This is, of course, is assuming that the federal government will provide no income replacement relief. Those of you that were around remember in 2008, 2009, there were ARA funds that came from the federal government we could plug in for lost revenue. Can't use any of the CARES money yet to do that. There is discussion that that may be something we can do with the phase 3, $300 million roughly that's out there, or some future federal funds would come. But right now, there are none of those resources we can use to plug revenue holes. And so that's going to be a significant issue. I would mention a couple of things about the Kansas Emergency Management Act and City and County Authority. I've got this in the written report. There have been any number of issues that we can just read about in the paper, and you all experience directly, as the issues between state emergency management declarations, executive orders, the authority of counties to make decisions with the county health officer, and the authority of cities to make other decisions, and that path is not clear. The Emergency Management Act was written to deal with natural disasters, unlike this natural disaster. And so there's a great deal of conversation going on right now about how we will manage the responsibilities and duties and authority between counties, cities, and state government going forward. That is an issue that's going to be very active during the 2021 legislative session. There's a large interim committee that's looking at that right now. There will be legislation making changes when they come back in 2021. A couple of issues worth noting. We are not letting up on the state's desire to preempt local government's authority. Some of the recently, from changing election dates to the tax lid to your local authority to control weapons, though we're seeing some new legislation that came up last year that essentially fell apart because the session ended 2 months early, but preempting lots of sustainability issues in terms of, for example, having your authority to ban plastic bags and those kinds of things. There's another bill that was introduced that would prohibit local units of government from implementing sustainability provisions related to public utilities. So there's going to be a lot of those issues are going to be coming back up next legislative session, in addition to the tax issues. And obviously, I just put a note in here. We're going to have some pretty serious conversations about public health, about related to the Emergency Medical Act, but also how and what our role might be in handling vaccinations and those kind of things going forward, and how additional money that may come into the state and passed on to the counties. Mallory's going to give a brief update about a couple of other issues, and then I'll be back. We can pause for some questions here. Just wait till we're done. Whatever you'd like, Mr. Chair.
Let's just continue on, and we might have questions at the end.
Okay, good evening. It's nice to see all of you. Wish it was in person, but alas. I'll talk about 3 things. I want to just give a brief update on the Crisis Center funding, and then I'll talk a little bit about some potential criminal justice initiatives for you to consider, and then just briefly touch on some affordable housing topics. So first of all, when it comes to the Crisis Center, I just want to thank all of you and your staff for all of your help and support during the first 4 or 5 months of this year in order to get funding for the Crisis Center, from Bob to all of the BHLC partners and the delegation. They were all incredibly supportive. And I see Carrie is on too, so I want to give a special shout out to Carrie for helping us develop that flyer. That was immensely helpful when we passed it out to legislators, and very helpful for them. So much like last year, our request is going to be the same, backing up a bit. So I think the third week of March, we had secured the $750,000 funding request. July 1 or around there, when the governor was making allotments and the budget cuts that Stuart had mentioned, the $700 million, we unfortunately were caught up in that. But then I think about a week later, KDAD stepped in and luckily was able to find some funding for our request. And so we did end up getting the $750,000 in base services, and I think contracts and everything have been signed for that. So we are very, very grateful for that. So much like last year, it'll be kind of the same deal. We'll go in, we'll ask for annual ongoing funding for those base services, just like all the other crisis centers get. And so it will be talking to a lot of the same people, but also educating some new folks that are in there on our request. And of course, we understand completely that this will be even harder, an even harder uphill battle because of the nature of the budget shortfalls. Moving on to criminal justice initiatives. So we had a conversation with some of your staff a month or so ago about some potential opportunities that we could pursue. Obviously, this will be a topic that will be discussed more so this year than probably any other year. And so you can see on page 3, I think, of our report, have several, a list of several items that are worth pursuing. I won't go through all of them since they're listed there, but I do want to point out just a few that have been talked about more so than others in the last several years, and some work has already been done on them. And so illustrating that some of these are probably more attainable, especially in the short term. So just, you know, keeping that in mind. In particular, the relating to driver's license suspension and fees, the Criminal Justice Reform Commission has been working on that since 2019. I believe the bill actually last year almost got across the line and probably would have if it weren't for COVID. So that's something that we know for a fact will come up again. Wouldn't be surprised if that gets pre-filed here before the session starts. Incentive-based probation is another topic. I believe the Kansas Sentencing Commission has been working on this for a while. They might have also introduced a bill last session, I think, related to that. You brought up the Board of Indigent Defense Services, and so the issue for having counsel at first appearance, which is not currently required, but it sounds like you've been having some conversation with bids about this, so that's a potential opportunity. And then just I'll mention one of the other ones that we might, you know, keep in our back pocket or to contemplate. The flexibility with sentencing guidelines. This is another one of those topics that the Criminal Justice Reform Commission especially and the Kansas Sentencing Commission have been looking at, I know, for the last couple of years. The CJRC has a work group on that. So obviously changing sentencing guidelines is not something that is going to happen in a year or two. That's one of those more longer term conversations that we could be involved in. But those are just kind of some off the top that have been talked about recently. And so just food for thought for you all. And, you know, pending your determination, we'll kind of go from there. And, you know, thinking about kind of your top 2-3 priorities that you might want us to pursue, and we'll go from there and start talking to the right folks and getting you in front of the right committees, you know, from the Governor's Commission on Racial Equity to the Juvenile Justice Oversight Committee. There will be lots of opportunities to get these issues out there. Last thing I'll just briefly cover, I talked a little bit with Jill about this, some affordable housing initiatives that we might want to pursue. So obviously this has been something that hasn't really been talked about very much, I think, in the relief. And so if you're following the Spark Committee, you know, this has just not been something that the state appropriated when they were handing out federal funds. So I wouldn't be surprised if it comes up during the round 3 discussions with the Spark Committee. But again, there are going to be so many groups coming for those round 3 funds. So not sure we would get it through there. But that will be a top priority, I think, on this issue is trying to get any future federal funds to go specifically for rental intervention assistance as opposed to rapid rehousing. I mean, that's a great initiative, but I think the key really is to reach people before they're evicted, before that step. So a couple of other things, banning the box measure. So of course this has been done on things like employment applications, you know, if asking you, have you been convicted of a crime, or have you any prior arrests? And so looking at this for housing applications as well, in terms of asking people, have you had a prior eviction? So kind of maybe removing that question from that initial application process. And then the last thing would be the little bit I know about tenant law in Kansas is that we have a pretty decent base tenant law, I think. And so there might be the option to get a payment plan between landlords and tenants before tenants are evicted. And so instead of a landlord being able to just evict somebody outright, implementing and requiring a step where they would have to propose a payment plan with that tenant. So those are just a kind of a couple things maybe for you to consider going forward. But again, once we kind of come to a conclusion on these things, we'll get moving at the state level and be talking to the delegation and other key folks. So.
And Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, we've met with your staff and with Mike and with Pam Wigan at the district court and talking through a range of issues. So then these are some of the things that we've talked about, and we're not picking any preference on anything that we're giving you on a list. We're kind of trying to put together a range of the topics and to give you some idea of the committees and some of the activities that are going on right now. So as you all in the future going forward make some decisions about where you want to spend some of your time and money or time and energy on topics, those are things that that's what we see right now kind of out there, some of the conversation. There is a final part of my written report that talks about the elections. We don't normally and won't normally have really exciting conversations about politics and partisan politics with you, but the election impact at the state level has some impact on where policy and revenue and taxes and those kind of things go. And I think after the primary elections in August, there will be some significant changes in the composition and of the 2021 legislature. We'll have to see how the general elections work out, but I think it's going to be clearly it's going to be a bit different than it was before. We'll see how all that works out, but I think the general tenor of how things are working out is that Medicaid expansion, some of the things that were on the county's legislative platform last year, some of those kind of things are going to be harder to come by probably next legislative session. So we are happy to answer any questions you might have about specific topics or in general at this time.
Questions, commissioners?
I don't have any questions. I just have a comment, and that is I think from my experience being on the BHLC and being part of the negotiations with the legislature and watching Stewart and Mallory navigate such a complicated funding request through complicated networks of people in Topeka with competing interests. And I just think it's some of the best taxpayer dollars we have ever spent. I don't know how we've done without this service, really. And especially in this upcoming season with so much of our, economy and our, with so much unclear and kind of unsettled, I think it's going to be hugely helpful to be connected to your service. And I just really recommend, Patrick, I think you'll enjoy plugging into their work, and especially in the criminal justice side. So
thank you.
Thank you.
My question is maybe for Mike, because I see he's still on the call. And Mike, we've got this list here of, almost a dozen items that they're looking for some guidance from us. Is this something that you have visited with the CJCC about? I'd sort of like to, personally, I'd like to hear from them on what they think the issues are that we should be tackling here. Do you have any thoughts on that, Mike?
So as directed by Chief Judge McAbry at the last Criminal Justice Coordinating Council meeting, I do want to make clear that we have to walk a fine line between the CJCC itself as a council cannot take on lobbying efforts and to support certain projects over another. But certainly the members of the Coordinating Council do. And so I see my role and and partnering with Little Relations is that we're able to keep our members educated on what's happening in Topeka. I know Sheriff McGovern has frequently been called to testify. District Attorney Branson sits on the Justice Reform Pre-Trial Task Force. Pam Wagen has been called to testify. You know, I see this as an opportunity to keep our members informed so that they can be engaged as their own agencies in these efforts. And so the issues that we discussed with Stuart and Mallory are certainly issues that members have brought to my attention. But I think this will be a formal process in the CJCC to forward this information to them.
So I want to make sure we're giving Stuart and Mallory the tools that they need. They've asked us to sort of refine this list and pick, I heard, between 3 or 4 things that we are going to focus on. Did I hear that right, Stuart and Mallory?
Well, I think what we want to make sure is that you all, with the folks in your community and law enforcement and the courts and the city, whatever you all want to do, this is certainly a range of things that are the topics that are being discussed in the area. These aren't in any kind of prioritized order from us. This is an attempt after the conversations we had to put some of these things out there on the table. And there may not be anything that the will of the commission is to proceed on, or there may be a couple of topics. And what we'll be able to do is we'll love to sit down and be part of the conversation. But as there's a coalescence around a couple of issues or whatever may be the priorities, those will be the kind of things where we'll be able to give you our expertise and say, this is probably we'll be able to give likelihood of success, risk and benefit analysis, and those kinds of things as we go forward to make sure that whatever is you all are interested in us working on, we'll all go into it knowing what the context here in Topeka, how it will be received and what's likely to happen. So we're not recommending anything other than giving you all options, and then we'll work with everyone to those options that you all want to pursue. We'll do what we can to increase our odds of success.
And Commissioner Kelly, I think that there's a way to sort of thread this needle in terms of what does the county commission want to advocate for in terms of progress, in terms of criminal justice in Topeka, and representing our other parts of our organization. If something came through the sheriff's organization that was important to the sheriff's office, how could we support those initiatives? I think we do need to respect the CJCC, and with judges on it, it's difficult for them to sort of take positions and votes, but that doesn't mean the county can't do that. And so I think as staff, we will continue to sort of, Mike and Jill and Pam have already met on those. I think we can continue to develop what those priorities are from a staff perspective, and then present it to the commission as part of that work that you could provide feedback on that could then help empower Stuart and Mallory as they work in Topeka. Does that sound like a pretty reasonable way to sort of work around it? I mean, I don't think we ever envisioned the CJCC would have their own legislative platform from that perspective. So, but really this is about the commission and the county government as a whole. So I think we can still continue to meet with Stuart and make sure it's what's making progress, but also what are we seeing at the local level that is really just difficult for us, those kind of things.
Well, that's really helpful, Sarah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I would just say, we dipped our toes in the water with this, having engaging little government relations last year and with one project or one focus area. And when I look back at how they worked with us to BHLC to craft that strategy, they had a meeting like this with BHLC, and then they got a little bit of feedback, and then they put together a plan of action. And now that we have this new opportunity with the timing of little government relations contract, we approved the expansion, but we need to start working on it sooner rather than later. So we're positioned for when the legislature gets together. So I do think getting a sense of priority areas that the commission feels strongly we should focus on, you know, whether it's tax policy, some of the criminal justice things here that have been listed, or are all of them. I had asked, you know, specifically about issues of housing, because it's what I'm hearing from our stakeholders in the community through the recovery work is it's huge. And I'm, you know, so I had personally asked for some information on that, but I will leave it to the commission as whether or not that's something we need to be advocating for more actively.
Thanks. Seeing no other questions, this is a regular agenda item, so I'll open it up for public comment. Is there anyone online or here who would like to provide public comment on this? Nope, seeing none. We don't need a motion on this. This was just information and discussion only. So I look forward to continued discussions as we move forward, so we can give Stuart and Mallory some direction, and they can come back and share with us sort of where the legislature is maybe headed, and give us some feedback. So thank you both.
Thank you.
That ends our regular agenda items. Let's move to appointments. Don't think we have any. And then general public comment. So general public comment is at the end of each meeting with a limit of 1 comment per person. The commission reserves the right to place a time limit of 3 minutes per speaker if desired. Individuals may not give unused time to other speakers. As a general practice, the commission will not discuss or debate, nor will the commission make decisions on items presented during this time. Rather, they will refer the items to staff for follow-up if necessary. All comments should be directed to the county commission. Jill, is there anybody online who'd like to provide public comment? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public comment and bring it to Commissioner or Administrator Miscellaneous. And we usually start with Sarah.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. Commissioners, you have the weekly memo in front of you for this week. Just a couple of things. The Criminal Justice Coordinating Council has decided to postpone their implicit bias training due to concerns about COVID-19. That group will take back up if we want to try to reschedule that, and when and how in September. But it was a public meeting, so I just want to be real upfront about it's it's a public group. It was not a public meeting, so I just want to be upfront about where we're at on that. In addition to, we put some stuff in here about the census. We're all about the census right now. So anything people can do to sort of help get the word out. Timing is coming to a close. It's very convenient to have a census during a global pandemic. That was sarcasm. So we just want to make sure that in this final push that folks are getting the information, that they have an opportunity to complete the census. And it's just so important to so many things that we do, that we have an accurate count. And then I wanted to mention that 2 things. We're starting to get back in some of the outlines of proposals from the groups that we asked to help run grant processes for the CARES Act funding. So we're going to kind of gather those and outlines, and I'm going to put them in our weekly memos kind of as I get a couple of them at a time. I will call attention to them when we have a meeting. We don't believe they need official commission action because you've already voted on the CARES Act, but I do want the commission to see this, and I do think it's about transparency, that folks know how the programs will be outlined. So they'll probably come to you in some batches over the next couple of weeks. And then also, we've had some conversations internally with staff and with the individual commissioners about the desire to move our meetings back to all Zoom. We decided to meet in a hybrid Zoom fashion to help review the CARES Act and all the work that had to go along with it. And then we had a pretty busy agenda last week in terms of some planning items. So the thought was to do that, but I think the thought would be to move back to Zoom for our regular commission meetings, unless At any point in time, if the commission decided they wanted to meet in hybrid fashion, we certainly could do that. We just generally need a week's notice to make sure we can kind of inform the public, and then also that we have our technology ready to go. Any concerns? Any other questions for me?
Any questions for Sarah?
Thank you.
Commissioners, any items? No, I just want to reiterate, people do their census. We need the money. We need you to do that. We do need to do redistricting based on this census, so making sure we get an accurate count would be really, really important. And also for the public, maybe about our meetings, we actually expected maybe more of the public to attend once we came back into session, and we're seeing a high level of comfort with our Zoom sessions. So I think we feel comfortable going back to that, and appreciate Sarah's flexibility with us. I know the school district has gone to in person and back and forth, and so this is not uncommon as we all try to figure this out. So thanks for your patience with us and as we do this. So if there's nothing else, we are adjourned.